Hey guys, it's Jasma, and today we're going to be making Mother's Day raspberry cupcakes. Now I've been busy for quite a while, so this isn't going to be posted before Mother's Day, but these are really delicious cupcakes. They're really moist, and I'm going to decorate them with macarons to make it extra special. They look really pretty, and the cupcake is super simple to make. So let's get started. First off, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit so that it's nice and ready to go. And I'm going to mix together my dry ingredients. So here I have some all-purpose flour. To that, I'm going to add the baking powder and baking soda and my salt. Then just give it a quick mix and then just set it aside. And then into a large bowl, I'm going to crack in my 2 eggs. Give it a quick mix. And then pour in the milk, vanilla extract, the flavorless oil, and white granulated sugar. And just mix everything together. Alright, that's mixed through, so now I'm going to combine it with the dry ingredients. And just mix until smooth. Make sure you don't over-mix this. I really like this recipe because everything is done by hand and it's also really simple since it's just done in one bowl. There are no more bits of dry ingredients, so I have just switched over to a spatula to make sure everything on the bottom of the bowl is completely combined with the batter. Alright, now we can place it into the cupcake tins. I have raspberries here. Today I'm using frozen raspberries, but you can of course use fresh raspberries. But if you are using frozen raspberries, you want to make sure you keep them frozen and don't thaw it out. So I already have my 12 cupcake liners in my cupcake tins, and you're going to need a mini ice cream scoop. So what I'm doing today is I'm not going to be combining the raspberries into the batter. I'm going to place a layer of batter, a layer of raspberries, and then cover it with more batter. So I'm just going to take a scoopful and put it on the bottom of each cupcake liner. If you don't have an ice cream scoop, you can also just use a tablespoon or a regular spoon. Just try to make sure that each cupcake has the same amount of batter. Once I have the batter at the bottom, I'm going to swirl the pan around just a little bit. You can also shake it to make sure that the batter is covering the bottom of the cupcake completely. Then I'm going to place on a layer of my raspberries. I'm slightly breaking up my raspberries so that they can fit in a nice even layer. Then I'm going to cover this with 2 more scoops of the batter. Once you have your batter on top, I like to take a chopstick. You could also use a spoon. Just make sure that you cover the raspberries completely. And don't play with it too much because you don't want the color of the raspberries seeping through the cupcake batter. I have my cupcake liners filled, and this recipe actually makes a little bit more than 12 cupcakes. Today I used pretty big liners, so it might make even more for you. I made 14 today. So before you bake this, you want to bang this on the counter a couple of times just to settle the cupcake batter into the gaps between the raspberries and get rid of any huge air bubbles. While the cupcakes are baking, I'm going to be decorating my macarons as a topper on these cupcakes. So since this is for Mother's Day, I'm going to be drawing on top of the macarons. I have a video on how to make these basic macarons. You will be able to find the link in the description down below. You don't have to use these if you don't want to, but I just feel like they add a lot to these cupcakes. For painting these macarons, I used some red gel food coloring and added some royal blue to it just to dull it down and get it closer to the shade of raspberry. You can of course use whatever shade you like. And as always, when it comes to painting macarons, you want to use some type of extract. I used almond extract today. Make sure you're not using water in this case because it's too wet and it'll soak through the actual macaron shells when you're painting it. Alcohol, on the other hand, which is in the almond extract, it evaporates a lot quicker, so it leaves the color behind without actually damaging the macaron shells. I also added some silver luster dust to my paint today, just because it looks nice. It comes in a tube like this. I found it at Bulk Barn. You should be able to buy it in any local craft store or big supply store, but of course it's completely optional. I just thought it's a nice touch. Paint, I'm using a pastry brush. You could find this at, again, a local craft store or your bakery supply store. Make sure you're using paintbrushes that are completely clean. You don't want to use anything that has been in contact with paint when it comes to your food. I'm using a pretty small brush here just to make the writing a lot easier. The cupcakes has baked in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 27 minutes. I inserted a toothpick into the center of each cupcake. It came out clean, that means it's done. So now I'm going to transfer it onto a cooling rack for it to cool completely, and meanwhile we can work on the frosting. So today I'm making a raspberry whipped cream frosting, and I'm going to be using real raspberry puree to color and flavor the whipped cream. I have half a cup of frozen raspberries here that I've left out at room temperature, so now they're nice and soft and mushy and the juices have come out. You can of course microwave it if you don't have the time to leave it out. And of course you can use fresh raspberries if you like to as well. So today I'm going to be pureeing this. Usually when you puree fruits you would use a blender of some sort, but this is a really tiny amount so it wouldn't really work in a blender. So I found that the easiest way is to actually just push it through a fine strainer so the seeds are left behind and the juices are pushed through. I've pushed all of my raspberries through the sieve, and you can see the puree is now really runny, and this won't be really condensed, so when we add it to the cream it can cause it to separate and it won't be as stable. So I'm going to microwave this for around 30 seconds. It might vary for you depending on how much raspberry you actually end up with, so they can condense a little bit more, become stronger, so it won't have to add as much and risk the cream splitting. I microwaved it for 30 seconds. It's still quite runny, so I'm going to put it back and microwave it for another 30 seconds. Alright, you can see the puree has condensed, it has reduced in size and thickened up a little bit. When you're microwaving the puree, make sure you're not doing it too long at once. So I went for 30-second bursts, starting in between, because if you put it in there for about a minute at once, it will cause the puree to overflow. It'll splash all in your microwave and make a huge mess, and you also might end up losing some of the raspberries as well. So make sure you're doing it in short bursts and using a large bowl so it prevents it from splashing all over the place. So now I'm just going to let this cool off and then we can work on our actual frosting. Now on to whipping the frosting. So once again I'm using my stand mixer. Of course you can do this using a hand mixer. And I'm going to be adding a little bit of cream cheese into this recipe actually because I find that it just really helps combine the raspberry puree into the cream without separating it. It also makes it a little stabilized and just a lot easier to pipe later on. So I have my whisk attachment, and into the bowl I'm going to add my cream cheese. I'm just going to start whipping it so it softens up a little bit. And then I'm going to add in my thickened raspberry puree. I'm mixing this before I actually add the cream, just once again to prevent everything from separating. Make sure that for this recipe you're actually using these raspberry puree, not raspberry jam, because raspberry jam has added sweetness and it just makes the frosting really, really sweet, and it also doesn't have the right color and flavor that we're looking for. And then to that, I'm going to add the icing sugar. Just going to start mixing on a very slow speed so the powdered sugar doesn't fly everywhere. Now that this is smooth, we can start to add in the cream. So first I'm going to add in a third of the cream just for it to combine with this mixture, and then add in the rest. Make sure your cream is nice and cold so that it can whip up a lot faster. Once the mixture starts to thicken up and you can see the tracks of the beater inside of the cream, you can add in the rest. And just beat until stiff peaks form. Alright, our raspberry frosting is now ready, so we can load it into a piping bag. I have a piping bag here that I fitted with a 1M Wilton star tip. You can use whatever type of tips you like. If you don't have a piping bag, you can also just use a Ziploc bag and snip off the tip. So when you're loading a piping bag, you always want to twist the end of it so nothing comes out when you're loading the bag, and then flip it upwards and then into a cup. The cup just holds it up for you and just makes everything a lot easier. Now I'm just going to frost these cupcakes. You could do it however you like. I'm just going to go with a swirl since I'm going to put my macarons on top of it later on. As just extra decoration, I'm going to be placing another layer of cupcake liners on the outside of each cupcake. Of course, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, it's just an optional touch. I just think it looks prettier with it on. So that's how you make these raspberry cupcakes topped with macarons. I made this for Mother's Day, but you can make it for really any occasion. You can write happy birthday on it and give it to somebody as a birthday cupcake. They look very impressive and they obviously taste very delicious as well. They do take a little bit of work to do, but they're definitely worth it. So I really hope you can try these out. Thanks for watching and see you guys next time. Bye!